Good morning. I'm Stan Bine, Michigan WIC Director, and welcome to our WIC webcast on management evaluations. Thank you for taking time to join us for the webcast, and we have a lot of great information to share with you. First off, I want to thank our three management evaluation reviewers that are going to be doing the management evaluations this year, and that's Nancy Erickson, Amy Thompson, and Suzette Daly. And as we discussed at the two-day coordinator meeting, our plan is that we're starting the management evaluations a little bit earlier this year than we have in the past. So we're beginning in February, and we're hoping to wrap up by the early fall. And the plan is that our local agency WIC consultants will be providing you assistance to prepare if needed for the management evaluation, and will also be working with you regarding any corrective action plans that you need to work with. So with that, the process that we've had in the past regarding the review of the tool changes is what we've got planned for today, and then talk about the management evaluation review process. So with us today is Nancy Erickson, that is going to be your presenter regarding the management evaluation. So I'm going to turn it over to Nancy Erickson.
All right, good morning. Hello and welcome to the Management Evaluation webcast. Today I will be reviewing changes made on the ME, or the Management Evaluation Tools, for 2017. The draft of the tool was sent out last week for comment, and I did receive one agency that sent me comments, so I do appreciate that. And those will be taken into account when we do the finals, which I hope to have done early next week. The actual draft of the 2017 tools can be found on our website. So if you go to our michigan.gov/WIC and then click on WIC Providers, and you'll come to this screen that's on your left-hand side, and then go down to Management Evaluation Tools. And then you'll see the screen to your right that says Management Evaluations, and then click on Management Evaluation Tools package, and then it will come up with the ME tools. And this screen just shows the 2016 tools, but if you scroll down on that, it will have the 2017 draft tools of that. So there are 7 sections that cover different areas, as well as a preview section of all the indicators and criteria. And you may want to have those in front of you as I review each of these tools. So you will find those, you will also find the MyWIC reports, and that's item 8 on this screen at that site, and this gives you where to find reports in the MyWIC system that are used for our management evaluations, and also completing the tools. And this should say, so it will say 2017 draft ME tools when you're looking at it today, and early next week it will have the 2017 ME tools on there. So on the second part of today's webcast, I will be talking about the past 2016 MEs and what were the top NetMed indicators, and then what areas you may want to look at for your agency if you're preparing either this year or next year for your management evaluation. So my name is Nancy Erickson. I know Stan introduced me. I am the Program Area Lead, or PAL, for management evaluations, as well as the annual reviews. So for this live webcast, which is on January 26, 2017, you may submit questions, or if you want clarification, that will be on your screen, and that the instructions were in the prior to this. There's a comment button on the bottom of your screen. If you click on that and complete those screens. So at the end of this section, or at the end of the webcast, I will answer those questions. If you are viewing this after that date, you may contact me directly by email or phone, and I will respond to you directly. And my contact information will be at the end of the webcast for you. So changes to the tools are a result of policy changes that happened throughout the past year. We don't change the tools mid-year. We keep them the same unless there's some major things, and I will talk about one particular change that we will have. They also come from USDA memorandums, and those are clarifications to our existing policies from USDA, and then USDA management evaluations, which we had this past year at the state, as well as 2 agencies had USDA there doing their management evaluations, and what our corrective plan of action was for that. It's also clarifying things on the tools as well as streamlining the tools, and that is something that we strive to do this year to kind of reduce it so it doesn't look so daunting, I guess. So let's get to one of the first tools, which is the Active Record Review. And when you receive these tools from us at the state, and this is about 30 days prior to your management evaluation, the Active Record Review will be white. So on the front page of that are the instructions. Excuse me. I reduced the wordiness last year on this, and I tried to do some more this year as it looks a little daunting when you look at it. You will find definitions to acronyms here that are used throughout some of the other tools along the left-hand column on those other tools. And then there were some pages that were kind of moved around on this review, and so the instructions reflect that change in the page order. On page 2 of the record review is the actual record review, where we review 14 records, and you may notice that there's a change in the order of items in the nutrition ed section there, and this just helps with flow when you're checking different screens and you don't have to keep going between a client screen and a family screen. So it was a flow issue there, so they're all still there. And under 10.1b, I omitted and benefits issued by, and this is part of a criteria from our USDA on the single certifier, and that the benefits issued by is not a single certifier criteria. It's really who's determining eligibility. So I removed that part of it on it. And then going on to page 3, where it has the single certifier review at the top. This is what the ME reviewer uses to audit your audit. And sometimes it's a little confusing. So whenever your audit's on single certifier, we will be auditing that. This policy will be changing later this spring with some new criteria, but for now, you will use the single certifier audit tool that is found under the management evaluation tools, and you will find that on the list. This has been a draft, so but later on it will be in policy, and you will find it in the policy section. And on the bottom of that page has the WIC CSFP dual participation. So CSFP was discontinued for WIC eligible categories in February of 2014. And the only counties that have WIC eligible clients on their programs currently are Genesee and those that fall under the Focus Hope label, which are Wayne, Oakland, Macomb, Washtenaw counties. And so for the advantage for those that have Focus Hope is that the MyWIC and Focus Hope interface, and that will show up when you go to do on the pre-cert screen. On page 5 is the compliance report, and you will see on here that we just changed the reporting time frame from 24 months to 12 months. And since you should be looking at this during your annual review, we chose to just go for the past 12 months or a year on that one. On page 6, under the formula approval review, you'll find that 4.3D was removed and that was replaced by 4.3A. And that has to do with all known qualifying conditions for the risk assessment and the Class 3 records being designated as high risk. So we didn't take it away, we just moved it to 4.3A. And I'll talk a little bit more about that as we go into some more areas on that one. On to page 7 is the high-risk care plan. And what I did was removed an additional criterion for follow-up on this. It was already in with the intervention plan, so that was ended up being a dual citation on that one. And then where it says care plan frozen, that criterion was added to it. This was a suggestion before, but it is in policy 5.06, and that is that it be frozen as soon as possible. So we suggest that if you can't do it that day, that the next day or so, that should be frozen on there. And then what we corrected what is required for the Nutrition Ed pop-up screen. What was listed there was a little different. So we went just by policy, and for a care plan, it will be the date, the topic, method, provider, initials, and evaluation, which is the same for any other Nutrition Ed topic that you're going to put in there. Okay, so let's move on now to the blue certification observation. When you get it from the state, it will be blue, like this, and that's what we use to observe during a certification and recertification. It's quite lengthy document, but it has everything in it that should be done during a certification. So it's very encompassing, but yes, it can be a little daunting on there too. So on the first page there, if you notice on the upper top left of the that first page, will have acronyms of I, S, and O, and those are defined. This was a mystery to many, including us here at the state staff, so but that stands for interview, system type thing, and an observation, so that we're all on the same page with that one. On page 2, there is 4.2A. There was a question about proxies asked towards the end of this tool, and it just made sense to put it at the beginning where you would ask for ID. So that was just included in combined questions on that one. On page 5, where we talk about weight and height, and what we did is change where it says accurately determine and record weeks gestation to our completed weeks gestation recorded for all children. And what we were finding is that many, if they said they were 37 and a half weeks, they were rounding it up to 38, and the correct way to do it is always round down. So if they say they're 37 weeks and 2 days, it's 37 weeks. If it's 37 and 6 days, it's still 37 weeks. So it's only completed weeks that you want to record in there. So hopefully that helps out in defining that a little bit better. On page 9, we added the flu vaccine onto that description there. It was in policy 6.03, and the flu part kind of got left off of there when we were talking about the third trimester Tdap vaccine. So all pregnant women should be provided information on the flu as well as that third trimester Tdap vaccine. And we're not requiring you to do the vaccines or provide that. It's just providing them with that information and making sure they're asking their physician about that. Moving on to page 10, and again, this is that 4.3D that we removed, and we moved it to 4.3A. And what was happening was that if you got 4.3A, B, or C, a citation on that, it was triggering a 4.3D, so it was a dual citation on that. So we removed that, and A encompassed everything in there anyway. So you should be happy about that one. Page 11, dealing with the client-centered nutrition education. And on here it had a reference to the CAR tool, and that is for 6.2, and we removed that. It is really a client assessment type thing, and not really a client-centered nutrition ed section. So, and that was coming up with the dual citation if you weren't using the CAR tool or asking questions from that. So we removed that. On page 13, you'll notice that when we're dealing with those resources or a list of resources for drug and other harmful substances, the new client, and I think this was a confusion, that new clients people were thinking are the pregnant women and not necessarily new infants. So we included that wording, including new infants, on there. So anybody new to the program should be giving a list of your local resources for those drug and other harmful substances. And we think of pregnant women as having, not using drugs during pregnancy. And then the idea here is that once you've had that baby, that you will have, during parenting, you want to be drug-free also. All right, on page 16, dealing with the food guide, just changing the wording there from infant food insert to the infant formula insert. So both the food and the formula were on that insert. Now we've included the infant food in the regular food guide, and that infant formula is a separate insert. And that really should only be given to infants who are receiving formula, and not to pregnant moms prior to having the baby. Just a good breastfeeding promotion thing to do. And then on page 17, where it has the print docs, and there it's just changing the word from breastfeeding forms to the breastfeeding release and receipt, and just defining that a little bit more of what we're looking for on that. Okay, we're going to move on now to the nutrition ed section, and this is going to be yellow when you get it from the state, and a nice canary yellow. Front page, there's no changes. On page 2, there remove some of the questions related to the wichealth.org. We had some things in making sure that you were offering wichealth.org, but it seems that there was no MPR or minimum program requirement or a citation associated with it. And so the other thing is that wichealth.org has become pretty popular and well received, so we didn't feel we needed to keep that on there. On page 3, dealing with the client interview for, this is for those who are doing self-directed modules. We removed some of the closed-ended questions, and for the benefit issuance section, just combined questions if they were using personal recognition or ID was checked. And this was confusing because it was 2 separate questions, and both of them are allowed. So we just combined them in there. So we're just finding out which one that you're using for that. And then on page 4, under the nutrition education materials, this can be from a 4th to 8th grade reading level, and this is directly now from the policy 5.01. There was some other preferable 4th to 6th grade, and I'm not sure where that came from, but we just went right from the policy, and also updated some of the WIC terms that are a little longer, pregnancy, some of those multisyllabic words, pregnancy, nutrition, education, those kind of things, and just made sure that all of those words were included on that list there. And then on to page 7, where we do high-risk counseling observation, and there we removed some of the additional reference to the follow-up that we have taken off because of that. It's part of the intervention plan, and then adding that making sure that you're freezing the care plan and putting that with a citation with that one. So make sure that your RDs know to freeze care plans within a day or two after putting them together, because they can be changed. And then we changed the MPR, that minimum program requirement, for the intervention plan from a 6.2 to the actual correct 6.6B, and that just helps, if it's correct, it helps you with your corrective plan and what to do in that area. And then on the last page, 8, is high-risk monitoring, and this was both here and as well as on the administration tool. And we removed it from the administration tool and combined some of the language between the two and just kept it here on the nutrition ed. It made sense to have it here. Okay, we will move on now to the administration tool, which is orange or salmon colored, like this. And on here, this is something that we would probably review with the coordinator at the entrance conference or during the week that we're there for management evaluation. And no changes on the first page, but on the second page we have added the homeless facility agreement policy. This is something that is new, and this is it came out in November of last year, and it requires that the local agency to have a facility, have their facilities in their area sign an agreement that WIC foods will not be used communally in their facility, and that the client will have access to their foods. So it was written in November. It is actually, the implementation date is February 1st of this year, so in another week or so, I guess, is when it actually needs to be implemented, and hopefully you've made steps to put that into place already. On page 5, dealing with the transfers, we have added some additional information. Several of our policies dealing with transfers were updated this past fall as a result of some of the USDA memorandums requiring that states provide VOCs. And so the language was just incorporated into this, and so we included or VOC to provide that to a transfer. On page 7, dealing with the dual enrollment, there was some reference to an archived webcast on compliance that actually couldn't even find. So remove that just so you're not looking for something that's not there. And then on page 10 is the high-risk monitoring, and I just mentioned before that we removed that from this administration tool and moved it all over to the nutrition ed tool, so we aren't doing any duplication on that. Okay, our next one will be the outreach tool, which will be pink when you get it from us. We try to keep everything color-coded. It makes it a lot easier than having all these different tools in the same white paper. This has been reduced, and hopefully you notice, in the number of pages on there. I've tried to reduce and cut back on things that aren't necessary for it. So on referrals, there was a question on providing clients with local resources for drugs and other harmful substances. And this question was removed from here, so you won't see it on this actual tool, because we asked that during, or we're observing that during that certification observation tool, the blue one. So as long as we're seeing it there, then it's not something necessary to ask those questions on there. And on page 2, under the racial ethnic discrimination section, the name of the Civil Rights Office was changed to the current name. It had still had the older one. And since there is now a new civil rights training module, that link has been updated. So you can go to this actual online to the tool and click on that, and it will take you right to your civil rights module if you'd like to do it that way. And on page 3, dealing with the civil rights interview, this is where the management evaluation reviewer interviews 3 clients from your agency, and you are not required to do this as part of your annual review, but you can find some interesting things from the perspective of the client if you do some of these interviews. So I would recommend doing it. Questions, if they received a client agreement, voter registration, and then breastfeeding information were removed. And we observed this during a certification on clients, so we didn't feel we needed to have that question asked of the client. And many times we got some ambiguous answers on that. And then on page 4, there's a question 8. And what we did is we removed the question, please describe any problems you had using your EBT card at the store, and replace it with a little more open-ended question. What is your shopping experience for WIC Foods? And here we're just looking to see that they feel comfortable using their EBT card. They know what foods to shop for, see if there's any problems at the stores that maybe we need to be aware of, those types of things. So it's and hopefully we'll get a little bit more feedback the way the question is worded. And on page 5, question number 11, that's just reworded to be a little more open-ended. We're trying to be a little bit more client-centered also, and having open-ended questions so we don't get the yes and no answers from them. Okay, now we will move on to the record keeping and accountability, dealing with the EBT cards, and this is a green. It may come a little brighter green sometimes on there. It's just a 2-sided form, so it's a pretty short one. And on here we added who's monitoring benefit overissuance and reissuance reports, and we felt that that was an important thing to know, just so you know as a coordinator or someone who's dealing with those EBT cards, and knowing what's happening in your clinic, being aware of that. So if everything looks good, then you're fine, but if you need to monitor something, then you're aware of it. We also removed some questions regarding issuing proxies, separate EBT cards. There was no no citation for that. It was a question just asking that, and it's not something that happens too often, and it really is up to you. You are allowed to issue an additional EBT card, and as long as you're using that all parties agree on how they're going to do it, that's fine on that. So, but that's not part of our management evaluation to ask that question. And then we also removed how often our clinics, the files, charts purge for obsolete records and forms. You get a e-notice every March that you can, destroy or remove your records, and it gives you that date of when to do it from that 3 years, 150 days out in the past on that. So didn't feel that we needed to ask those questions. All right, next we're moving on to the Project Fresh tool, and this is a TAN tool. And if you have this filled out prior to your management evaluation reviewer coming out, that would be helpful. And especially one of the issues now that we're doing a little earlier, I was just talking to Stan, is that if we're starting in February, then you won't have started any Project Fresh for this year. So what you'll do is base it on the previous year and that Project Fresh, that how you did it then. Okay. What we did on page 1 was added the wicchealth.org column under the nutrition education, and how is that being provided, since now you can go to wicchealth.org and get your Project Fresh education on that. So that was included. And then on question 5 on the next page, we removed the video and the food demonstration on that. Wasn't being used mostly. And then we added some State Power issued PowerPoint, which I'm told is going to be done, that you'll have a PowerPoint that we provide you, and as well as the handouts that go along with that PowerPoint on there. So those were added to that. Okay, next I would like to talk about the indicator guide, and that is a rather thick document, and it is also called a pre-visit guide in the MyWIC website. So if you see it there, and I did get a comment that maybe we should change it and be consistent on our titles on those, so that will probably be changed to an indicator guide because it really is what it is. So this is a encompassing document. It goes through all the indicators and criterion, and this is where your minimum program requirements, or MPRs, you can find that on there. It is also listed by the indicator number. So that number 1 is the indicator number, and if you go down, that 1.1 is the criteria. So sometimes if you hear us talking about indicators and criteria, what does that mean? Well, that's how it's broken down there. And then below that on this document, it says this indicator may be met by, and then you'll have letters A, B, maybe C. You have different amounts of letters on there. And these are the criterion, and this is what you are evaluated on. So it's a good thing to go through this and find out what are we doing to make sure that that's included. And then below that is documentation required. And these are items which we may ask for during a management evaluation. So it might be something you want to make sure you have there. And then next are evaluation questions. And these are part of our tools. So we actually, all the questions that are in here are part of our management evaluation tools that I just reviewed on there. The letter in parentheses at the end of each of these bullets corresponds to the criterion letter under how the indicator may be met. So many of the coordinators find that if they take this indicator guide, print it off, and then put it in the binder and put the supporting documents, or where this information can be found after each criteria, is very helpful to them. So it's a way of preparing for their eval. So on this guide, there are obviously, since we changed things in the tools, that some of the things in the guide have been also changed, maybe in wording. So if we start on page 8, there is indicator 3.1 under G, and this has to do with that separation of duties or single certifier. And what I did is just made it a generic statement. Didn't want to contradict current policy or what our future policy will come out in the spring, around May. So it's just a little more generic on that one. On page 11, where it talks about the nutrition or the lactation consultant educator, the word "or" was in there, and it made it sound like you could have either a CLS and some of those types of credentials, or an IBCLC. So just kind of reworded it. Currently what you must have is a CLS, a CLE, or a CLC on staff who are coordinating your breastfeeding counselors. But by the end of this fiscal year, which is October 1st, you will need to have someone who is IBCLC. So hopefully you're in the process of doing that. And if you aren't, not sure what I'm talking about, then you need to contact Julie Lothamer at the state and discuss that with her and make some plans on that. All right, on page 16, that indicator 4.3, we removed that 4.3D criterion, and now this is included in 4.3A. So if you're wondering where 4.3 went to, that's why. And then and then you'll just see some of the evaluation questions just moved around a little bit to put them in alphabetical order. Under page 29, that's indicator 6.2. Under assessment, we removed that health history and client assessment reference tool, and I had talked about that earlier because this was all part of 4.3, and that's because of 4.3 deals with assessing your client, and 6.2 deals with the nutrition education and client-centered types of what you're doing for that. On to page 33, indicator 6.4, this deals with the materials that you're providing nutrition education-wise, and the wording was changed on that one to deal with the way the policy is, and that is that 4th to 8th grade reading level on there, so that's consistent in there, as well as some of those multisyllabic words that we use a lot in WIC with nutrition education and pregnancy and vitamins and those types of things. And so those words are included in that. On page 37 is under indicators 7.2. Here we just clarified some of the wording under evaluation questions, and when we're talking about issuing a food package and the client's needs, and we just included that 2% milk packages, soy milk, allergies, those types of things that you're including in that when you're dealing with the client's needs. On page 48, under the indicator 10.1, and that is the single certifier language, just changed that a little bit, and that deals with just who, a single certifier is someone who is determining eligibility on that, and it doesn't have anything to do with who's issuing benefits, is what we've kind of had before, but that is USDA has changed that definition on there. And then on page 50, under indicator 12.1, we've added the criterion E, which I had inadvertently left out last year on this, and that's that local agencies shall provide information to women enrollees, especially pregnant women, to receive that influenza vaccine, and in their 3rd trimester that Tdap or pertussis vaccine, and that has been in the news lately, so it's an important thing to make sure that women know about receiving that Tdap. It helps the baby who cannot get a Tdap for several months after delivery, so it protects the baby. So it's an important vaccine to make sure our moms know about that. Okay, now we'll go on to the MyWIC reports, and this is a two-sided, and I'm using some of my older sheets here. We try to do it in purple so it's easy to find, and on here, this has the addresses basically on how to get to the reports and what it is used for. So what we've done is changed a few of the addresses weren't quite correct, so those were corrected on there. Just move some of the reports around to go under the specific sections, such as administration or where you're going to be using that in the ME tools. And then remove the guidance under the hemoglobin daily summary report, and there it just talked about high-risk infants being monitored at infant eval. Just felt it was making it a little too wordy, and that is in policy to do that. And then also added in there the benefit overissuance report for EBTs and how to get to that, since we included that in the green record keeping and accountability form. And then also added the local agency directory in the admin section, and that is for our reviewers, just so they are aware of how to get to where your agency is located. And sometimes that's not always, we didn't all know how to do that, so it has your addresses and phone numbers, and that's why it's really important to make sure that that gets updated and that's due soon, by the way, to have your directory updated. And then the single cert report, that will be needed to be updated once we have that a new MyWIC release in May and have our policy updated. So that will be something that will have the actual address of how to get to it, because it's a little different than it used to be of where you're going to find that single cert report. All right, so during our management evaluation, our USDA management evaluation this past spring, they made a recommendation to us that we look at some previous management evaluation citations, as in your 2 years ago management evaluations, and to see if any of those are repeated in the next ME. So what we will do is we will review this as part of the exit conference, if it is for the same criterion as well as the same issue on that. So you will be seeing that in the exit conference, and it will not be an additional citation or anything like that. So so you may see that, and we will look to see that you have a plan on that if it's still an issue going on. All right, so just make sure that you have, so that's the end of the section for reviewing the new tools on 2017. You've gotten a couple questions, but I think I will leave those until the end of the webcast. So you can still continue to go ahead and submit those questions as we go along with the webcast. And if you're watching this live, my contact information, not watching it live, then the contact information is here on the screen if you want more questions or need some clarification on things. So I'm going to move on to the last year's management evaluation. So 2016 seems like it was last month, and it is our last year's thing. So now we're in 2017. And what I'm going to do is review those, the not mets, and what the recommendations were. And I'd like to thank Amy Thompson for compiling and reviewing all that data from this past year on the management evaluations. It really helped us to review our tools and what changes need to be done or how we need to look at things. So it's very helpful to have that done. So as we look at our the last several years on our management evaluations, we had a total last year of 113 not mets, and this is down from 115, and it doesn't sound like a big drop, but in the even years we have more agencies. We have 4 more agencies being done, 26 as opposed to on the odd years 22. So it's a little bit more significant than that. And then we had 137 in 2014, so that's it's doing better on that. That's nice to see. The range for all of them was pretty similar, from as far as the range from 1 not met up to 10 on the average. And then 4.4 last year, and that's down from 5 and 5.3 in the other 2 years. So we are doing better. So we're hoping that those numbers continue to decrease, and as we do our evaluations. All right, so for our indicators that were met, we got 100%, and here are 14 indicators that were 100% on that, and this is actually an additional one from the previous year. So we are doing better on that too. That's always good to see. We do try to make sure that things are clear and everyone understands what is required, especially for our management evaluations. So let's start with our indicator 4.3. So on the top of your screen there, it will show what what it's about, what 4.3 is, and I know numbers probably don't mean a whole lot to you, but we deal with it all the time, so I kind of know what those numbers are. And what the overall is, how much was met. In parentheses, you have the actual number of agencies that met that, as well as the percentage, and then the agencies not met, and in parentheses. And in this case, there were 20 agencies that didn't meet this. So it's a pretty high number, 77%. And most of it comes from, well, I wouldn't say most of it, but a lot of it is from the CAR tool. And we know that this is a major issue, and we are trying to come up with what we can do to make it an easier system to work through, and how to incorporate that into your questions that you're asking them anyway. So 6 of those agencies just not using the CAR tool or asking the questions from it, and that's in A. In B, the anthropometric assessment, and this is just not following procedures, and it's a lot of it was not confirming the measurements, meaning that you actually measure them or weigh them twice. Everyone has to be weighed and measured twice, and you are confirming that measurement. If it's not confirmed, then you need to do it possibly a 3rd time. So making sure that gets done every time for everyone. Not having 2 people involved in doing the length for those infants and toddlers. So you need to have someone up at the head, as well as probably whoever's doing the weighing and measuring down at the feet doing the length on that. So you know that they're going to squirm around, and so you need 2 people for that. Not using a disposable paper, so putting that down on the floor when you're doing the height measurement, or onto the scale for the adults or children, or on the infant scale or length board on it. So making sure you have something like that down, especially in the summertime. People are going barefooted a lot of times once they take their shoes off, and you need to have their shoes off too on that one. Using only one leg, so making sure that they have both legs down. If you're using one leg, it's going to be an inaccurate measurement on there, so both knees need to go down, and measuring both legs, feet on the measurement board. So that's particularly with those lengths on the little under 2-year-olds. And then with equipment, it has to do with measuring, having measurement boards that weren't accurate. So if you find that you have loose measuring equipment, so it's loose on the wall, or the board, the head or footboard is loose, then you need to really look at that and see if that is still accurate. The other thing is that calibrations need to be done annually, so you need to find a company and have that on an annual basis coming out. And many times they will do your measuring equipment too, your height and your length board. So see if that will be part of that calibration, so you don't have to always worry about that. I always look at if you're having any construction around your thing, it's moving your walls or vibrating it, sometimes it makes things loose. So those need to always be accurate. And if we continue on with this, C deals with the hematological. There were 7 errors here. And on here, some of the issues were not performing a retest according to your own local agency policy. So all local agencies are required to have a retest policy, and depending on where that level is, and staff need to know that, and whether you post that up there so that staff know how and when to do that retest policy. Not asking if there's a bleeding problem, so do that prior to poking them. Sometimes I get it when they've poked them, or in the midst of poking them, if they have a bleeding problem. You want to know that in advance. Not recording on the daily hemoglobin log, so sometimes they just put it in the MyWIC system and not recording it on a log, and part of policy is that you record that on your daily hemoglobin log. And then not completing a HemoQ quality control log, or have it complete in there. And some of these things are very detailed type things, and what I would recommend is lab training. It reviews all of that quality control on there, and it's a great way to do it, as well as the anthropometric training. Each of those are a day long, and it really does go over all that quality assurance type thing you need to know. And then under D is the assignment of risk. There was 8 errors there, and that was on not all the applicable risk codes, and this really did deal with probably that A, B, and C didn't get done correctly. So if you're not weighing them correctly, then you may be missing a risk code. So this is actually going away for next year, so we won't see D on here after this year. And as well as those special formulas, those will go under making sure that the risk, if you get a special formula in and there is a medical problem on there that has not been put into the MyWIC system, that gets put in there at least by the time they have that research or an eval, if you don't put it in at the time you get it. It's probably best if you do it at the time that you get that medical documentation form, that way it doesn't get missed. Our next one is 6.2, had 14 errors overall on here, and this is how nutrition education is provided. 54% missed this on there, and a lot of it was in our client-centered nutrition ed, and this has really been improving. It's been nice to see when I go out to agencies that it hasn't been improving, but still some areas where you're not identifying and exploring clients' concerns. Sometimes I think we have our own agenda of what we think the client might need, but remember that this is the client's concerns, needs that they want addressed. In self-directed nutrition ed, if they're doing those modules, some aren't able to choose what type of module they want to do or nutrition ed topic that they want to choose. And again, that's client-centered if they can choose that. And then not asking about previous nutrition ed, and that's part of the assessment section on that. And then under B is reviewing that previous nutrition ed, and then not giving that client the opportunity to review it, not asking questions on that. So just making sure that asks, how did that last? You did WICHealth.org last time. Did you find anything interesting in there, or have you done anything? Those types of questions. Under C, the client-centered nutrition ed, there was 9 errors there. Not addressing clients' concerns, and not summarizing some of their concerns and then how that nutrition ed can help. So it's a real listening skill that has to happen to do that, and a lot of practice with that. Not affirming and supporting the positive changes that they've made, and we're trying to do behavior change, so that's going to be important to make sure that that's great that you've cut back on the amount of juice that Johnny's drinking, and that'll just lead to hopefully more positive changes. And then not documenting that nutrition ed that was provided in the system. And some of that came from newer staff and not always knowing that needs to be documented or the process of that. Under D is nutrition ed plan, and there were 7 errors on this part, and that's not developing the plan with the clients. So telling the client that they're going to do WICHealth.org next is not developing the plan with the client. So there's different ways of doing it, but asking them generally what they want to do. It really does depend on what's, if they're high risk, you want to ask them that. If they want to see the RD. Those type of things is doing it with the client and not telling them what they're going to do. And then the documentation of that nutrition ed plan in 2 of those cases weren't done. And if you notice this in parentheses, there's the number that were errors, and I know 6 plus 2 does not equal 7, but sometimes it's a combination that they got more than 1 error there. And then under E, providing information on the dangers of using drugs. That was 2 errors there in that giving any information or any information available for clients to take. So having some kind of pamphlets available for clients, whether it's smoking or alcohol or some other types of drug, information on the dangers of that is required to have that in your agency. And it's also on your nutrition ed plan that, avoiding drugs. So doing that will help if you review their nutrition ed plan, whether you do it on the screen or on paper. Moving on to indicator 6.6 under nutrition counseling services. And this was 54% not met on this one. And some of this it is a lot of detail on here. I do understand that. So part of it is identifying and offering those high-risk services. 5 errors there is just not documenting that the services were offered. So either scheduling them for high-risk services or recording in the any pop-up that they are that they refused or they are seeing another RD, a non-WIC RD, those types of things. So everything is documented that we did offer that. Under B, care plan documentation. This 9 errors there, and this is having to do with the actual writing of the care plan. And the intervention plan was incomplete. So things like not documenting the client's desired outcomes. What do they want to get out of this? And getting some behavior changes, 1 or 2 or 3. Sometimes we have a big agenda for them, so sometimes 4 or 5 or 6 get put on there, which we want to make sure that they're doable. And then some other practical interventions that might be tried, and putting those down on paper. And the follow-up not being done, and then documenting that you saw the client in the any pop-up, not being done there too. So that still needs to be done. Even though you've done a care plan, the nutrition ed needs to be documented in the nutrition ed pop-up screen. And then monitoring the high-risk and Class 3 formula clients. Here we only had 1 error, which is pretty good, 1 agency. So making sure that gets done on a routine basis, that you know that people who are high-risk or receiving Class 3 are getting seen by an RD. And then that follow-up documentation, there were 4 errors there, and just documenting if there was going to be a follow-up or what that follow-up would be on there. So kind of what is the next step type things that you need to put in that care plan. Many times you're not going to solve the world's problem in that 1 visit. Indicator 5.1, and that deals with referrals. And so now we're down to 35% number of errors on there. So we're doing better on this. On the next few slides, I will show you the workaround for the bug in the referral screens, and hopefully that's going to be fixed in our next release on there. So on the Medicaid referral, and this is getting better, only 3 errors there, just making sure that all clients on WIC really are Medicaid eligible. So they should be marked either the referred, discussed, or current. So we always look at that on the referral screen. And then for the B section under health and community services, so other types of services that may be beneficial for the client. So MIHP and Healthy Start are, or some other similar program, people who aren't being referred. And just keep in mind that all pregnant women and infants are required to be referred to that if they are receiving Medicaid. And then some other services like lead, family planning, immunizations. If those things come up, those should be referred. And keep in mind that if they walk into your into your building, into your office, and they do not have these services, you should be referring them. So even if they get that service that day, immunizations, or you give them a lead testing, or you send them down the hall, those are all actual referrals because you are actually referring them to that agency or a program, and they didn't have that before they came in. If they came in with it, that would be a current referral. So on this screen is your MyWIC referral screen, and if you remember that those items that are in bold are suggestions, that these are based on their client category. So that kind of helps you in what I need to target for referrals. So it's a little help there on that. And there are ways of, if you go into the help screens, it will tell you how to complete this. So in order to get the discussed, the referrals in the current screen. The current is easy because you just do a click. The referred and discussed, you have to double click on those. So the problem has been that once you put in current, it blanks out everything else, and hopefully you've realized that. And this was a workaround that was provided last summer on here, and this is just a reminder here that you need to check the discussed and referred first, save that, and then check the current referrals, and then save that a second time on that. If you go back and you do a referral, you forgot one, then you will find that that a lot of it will be blanked out, especially your current. So it's not always the best flow, I understand, but until this can be worked out, make sure that you do it in that order. And then continuing on with that 5.1 on referrals, the program providing new clients with the local resources for drug and other harmful substances. There were 6 errors there, and most of these were infants that did not receive this, and that's part of the reason we included that in the tool, is a reminder that even infants need to be provided with this. So even if the pregnant mom was on the program, she just came on a month ago, you still want to make sure that that mom gets the information about the list of your local resources. And if you have more questions, you can see policy 6.02 on this to get all the information that you need for that. So you're looking at just getting your local resources, a list of addresses and phone numbers, places that they could go to. And my screen's not advancing here. All right, on 6.1, this is providing nutrition education. And we're, again, in the 30% there. Nutrition ed contacts. So this is when you were doing the record review. So out of 14 records, generally we had between 2 and 4 records that did not have the required number of nutrition ed contacts in there, so it's not a huge problem on there. But just keeping in mind, we're looking at if someone's being offered nutrition ed, that we're looking at past appointments and their nutrition ed plan. So if they have wicchealth.org on there as their plan, we realize that a lot of people are not scheduled an appointment for that. So that would be an offering on that, even if they don't have an appointment. And then checking for any received or refused nutrition ed on there. And then also on the nutrition ed pop-up, that wasn't always documented there. So making sure that that all gets populated with all the required sections on there. Okay, under 5.4, this has to do with the notification of civil rights and responsibilities. Here it was only one error on the client agreement, and this was just not using that current agreement, so making sure that you have an up-to-date one that clients are reading, and that is in all the languages, that you make sure it's the current client agreement that you have. notice of ineligibility, and this has been kind of a challenge one that I've been finding, that with a lot of people going into doing reports and trying to find clients that have been off the program and seeing if they're eligible, trying to get caseloads up, that they're kind of making problems for themselves and in a way. So just remember that if you are putting them under the client information screen, if you're putting them as reason for ineligible and you're putting something in there, then that's when you can print out a notice of ineligibility. If you don't put anything in that box, it will not allow you to print out a notice of ineligibility. So if you just put in a note that they were over income, then no, you won't be able to generate a notice of ineligibility. So, and then the other thing is not documenting the reason why. So if it is income, you need to make sure that you complete that family screen with the income in there, and stating that they are higher than what our maximums are. Otherwise, if they do have a fair hearing, there's no documentation that this is what you provided to us and this is why you're over income, or whatever reason it is. Make sure that you complete all the screens up until that point. Don't just say, oh, and then stop before you can document. And then under voter registration, that there was one agency just wasn't documenting the declination. So making sure that you're having clients fill out that declination top section in there if they don't want to register to vote. Indicator 7.3 under special formulas. This has gotten so much better. We really have improved this. We had half the numbers of citations as the previous year on this one, so this was 7 errors, and we've had at least 14 the previous one. So some of the issues here is just incomplete medical documentation forms, those MDFs, making sure that they get completed from the doctor's offices and making phone calls if they aren't, and some things can be, that information can be transferred over the phone, yes, and sometimes you may have to fax it back over, have them fax back over with that additional information in there. It all has to be complete. Sometimes the food package didn't reflect what the medical documentation form is, so making sure that if the doctor says to omit certain foods, or if they've got they're on a formula that has a lot for allergies, that you're not including those foods that they're allergic to on there. Incorrect expiration dates, making sure that those correspond with the MDF, and sometimes the MDF wasn't scanned, so sometimes that's just a clerical issue, and making sure that gets put in there, some kind of process problem in there. So that needs to make sure that gets put into the system documentation. Okay, 9.1 indicator, dealing with completed records for program operations. This has really improved also since last year. We had 14 the previous year, and this past year was only 6. It's still a little bit of a problem in there. We have decreased the number of pumps that we're giving out, and that in a way helps. There's less pumps to have to deal with, but then you don't do it too often, so then you run into the issue of not remembering how to do it. So most of this deals with the breast pumps, and this is the releases or the receipts aren't being signed and in the record. So either you scan that release or a receipt, which is the receipt is when a multi-user pump comes back in. You need to really make sure that that client signs a receipt that they brought it back in. Or that you do the signature pad for that. Either way is fine. And then overdue breast pumps not being monitored, that needs to be done on a monthly basis. So pulling up that report at least on a monthly basis and making sure that gets done checking how they're doing with the pump and if they still need it. And then the other issue was annual review and not completing that. And that has been around for quite a long time. Every year you must complete an annual review, as in the name, and this can be done throughout the year. It's not something you need to do just that week like we do in a management evaluation. You can do sections periodically each month, do a different section of that. And you can use the ME tools that we provide, or you can use your own forms. And here I'll let you know that if the ME tools are something you want to use, but it would be nice if they were had additional lines or something like that that makes it easier for you to use in your clinic or agency. Just let me know. You can email me or call me, and I can send it to you in a Word document. And if you want to do some tweaking of that, that's fine. Keep it mainly intact. Don't add in different criteria that we don't put in our MEs. Now we're on to 6.5, dealing with breastfeeding promotion, protection, and support. And we're down now to 19%, so we're in the teens on the percentages, so that's good. Here we had that staff orientation to breastfeeding wasn't developed, documented. So it really does need to be something that you have on paper. And this can be something that you get from either another organization, another agency, and you can, if you're kind of stumped on what to do, you can always ask Kathy Koziel Daly or Julie Lothamer at the state office if you're kind of wondering what to do on that one. And then under the actual providing the breastfeeding education, that here we found when we were looking at records that breastfeeding education and referral wasn't documented, and we're looking at that for all your pregnant moms in there. And then no breastfeeding follow-up was done if there was some request to have a lactation consultant or a peer counselor to talk with. All right, 6.3 under eligibility explanation. Here we only had only four, and this has gotten better over the years, I've noticed. And if you use that nutrition ed plan as a reminder, that has what you need to explain for that eligibility explanation. You can put it in your own words, is fine. And basically, you need to include what we provide, which is supplemental food, nutrition education, the referrals, and breastfeeding information and support. And to say that the food benefits are for the client, and this is also in the client agreement, that part. And then encouraging the pregnant women to breastfeed, or if you have a breastfeeding mom, to continue to breastfeed on that. So it's just basically telling them that they're eligible for WIC and this is what we're providing, so that they know that. So under indicator 9.2, we're dealing with the EBT cards and the inventory and storage for that. And this is down to only 4 agencies, which is pretty good. So under that bridge card inventory, there were 3 errors. And here is that physical inventory not being completed on a monthly basis and documented. So remember, if it wasn't documented, it wasn't done, kind of a thing. And that is done on the daily inventory log. So it may seem kind of weird that you're doing it on a daily inventory when you're actually doing a physical inventory on both the daily as well as any bulk EBT card inventory that you have. But it's a nice place to keep it documented there, and there's a column to the far right on that form to complete that. On your issuance logs, there were on two agencies, there's some missing information on the logs, so just making sure that all that gets completed, and maybe having somebody check that on a weekly basis or a monthly basis, making sure that all that information is in there and we didn't miss something. And then on bridge card security, here was just not limiting the access to the bulk EBT cards, and that those were stored with sometimes they're stored with your daily, and so multiple people have that. It really should be limited as to who can get to those. So it should be maybe in another area off somewhere, something you're not going to get to too often. So making sure that gets limited. Then we have indicator 7.1 under the authorized foods, and here we're still in we're less than the teens, 12%. Three agencies had errors here. And with the new food guide out this past summer, I think we forget that not all clients have been aware of the changes. So after about the first month or so, we kind of got into the groove, and we know it pretty well. But we need to remind staff that when a category changes, like at the 6-month mark when foods are added for babies, or at the 9-month when you can add fresh fruits and vegetables to that, you ask the client and make sure that they understand the options, and that that's on their card now if you decide to do that. And adding the yogurt in is another one in there. And then when they turn 1 year old, when they're going to whole milk, when they're going to 2 years old, when they're going to the lower fat milk, those types of things, as well as for women when their category changes, you need to let them know that their food package will also change. So just making sure that you notify those clients. And we know those things, but remember, our clients, this is the first time they're going through this a lot of times. Under indicator 10.1, this is prevention and detecting of client and employee fraud and abuse. So this is in regards to the single certifier clients on there. And this was only 3 errors on there, and part of it was just not documenting the scanned, those items that are required to scan if you have a single certifier on a client. And another one was not doing the required number of audits, so doing less than what was required. So this is something that you want to make sure that it's protecting staff as well as your clients on there. So making sure that that gets done. And you will see some more information on the single certifier coming down, and I've said that before, in regards to the percentages will change. Right now you need to do 20% of any clients that are being single certified. It's not a recommended way of providing services to clients, but we realize that there are some clinics that do only have a single certifier in there. But that, and that report will be working hopefully in May, and so you'll have something else. So right now you need to use your schedules and having staff let you know whenever they do a single cert, if it's on a odd day, or they had to do it for shortage of staff or whatever that is on there. All right, so we had talked about management evaluations being done earlier this year instead of doing them all in the summertime when staff are trying to take vacations. So we are starting next month in February. And so what I'd like to do is go over the management evaluation process as a review for our old-time coordinators, and for those newer coordinators, kind of knowing what's going to happen in the management evaluation process. And it helps me too to remember what we're doing. So the first thing we're doing is preparation, and that's your annual review. So hopefully with doing that every year, you will just know what areas you need to work on. Your local agency WIC consultant will help you. So whatever you decide you want them to do. If you want them to come visit, to do a mini ME, to go over some things, if you want them to review some reports and let you know what they think, whatever's helpful to you. So you let them know, and they should be contacting you also prior to your ME and asking what you want them to do. The second part is that you actually have the management evaluation, and all those are scheduled already for this year. This does occur every 2 years regardless of what happens. You're either on the even schedule or the odd schedule, the odd year schedule. And this is starting next month, and the management evaluation is usually about 4 or 5 days long, with the exit conference at the end of it, and you will get a summary report having your special recognitions, things that we find that you are doing really well in your agency, as well as what you need to work on, those not mets in there. You will have then 45 days after we send the report back to you, and it'll be about 30 days after your exit, you will receive, no, it's 45 days you'll receive the report after the exit, excuse me. And you'll receive the full ME report on there, as opposed to the summary that you just got at the exit. And then you should also receive an electronic template with all your not mets on there, and that's where you will put in on number 4 your corrective plan of action, or a written CPA. We've got a couple things that are CPAs on there, and unfortunately that wasn't our doing in naming it that. So if you don't receive that electronic copy of your CPA to record what your plan is, make sure you let your consultant know, and they will get that to you. And so you have 30 days then to submit this CPA back up to the state, to your consultant, and to Cheryl Darling. And so make it doable, something that corrects the actual problem. And again, if you need help with it, contact your consultant if you're kind of wondering what direction to go to. That's what they're there for. And then under number 5 there, you have your 90 days of implementation. So working on that and making sure that you've been doing your audits, your reviews, any monitoring that you have planned on your corrective plan of action. And then once you haven't been implemented it for at least 30 days, then you can schedule with your WIC consultant for, and under number 6, your follow-up review of your CPA. So this is a follow-up visit, and this will be done this year. This will be done by your actual consultant. So they will be coming out to your agency, and they will be hopefully scheduling that if they haven't already. And they'll review your CPA, any supporting documents like meeting minutes, trainings, audits, reports, doing observations that you have done. Hopefully that's not a plan that they have, but they may do that if it's necessary. And if everything looks good and there's a significant improvement, then you will receive a final approval of your management evaluation from the previous year it ends up being, because your follow-up is generally the next year is when that happens. This year it may happen a little bit earlier, since we have MEs happening in February and March and April and May, that you may have your follow-up that same year, but in the next fiscal year, so maybe in the fall that follow-up can happen. All right, so please submit your questions by going to that comment thing on the bottom of your screen, typing in your questions, and we will come back in about 10 minutes and answer them. Welcome back. We have a few questions here, so I'm going to answer those questions. I have a couple on the referral screen glitch, and basically it boils down to asking if we are going to be cited during an ME if because of the glitch on the referral screen. And we understand that there's a bug there, a glitch. So it really is looking at it a case-by-case basis. If we didn't see any referrals on the screens when we look through some records and we see that during observation that you're not referring, then that may be an issue. But if we're seeing that you're referring, but it's just not coming up on the screens, then we will go on and ask further questions on that one. But that bug, that workaround was provided, it's been provided several times on that. So just make sure that your staff know that also. Next question from Washtenaw County: can the date be listed instead of the most recent copy for the state-issued fair hearing flyer? And this fair hearing flyer has not changed, and I don't remember the last date. It's not like the civil rights thing that gets changed more than once a year sometimes. And this can also be printed from the MyWix system. So I will look into that some more if that's an issue. Thank you for bringing that up, but it hasn't changed, and that's just sort of to keep things a little more generic, and we don't have to keep changing that every, 8 years or something. All right, and then a question on when we're doing client interviews. Abby asks, when interviewing clients in the clinics during the management evaluation regarding the EBT cards using and uses at the store, will the local agency be penalized if the client has a negative response? And no, we don't. I think part of it is just getting, if there's some issues there. So if we get a number of clients saying they never got a food card, food guide, those type of things. The other question to this, it seems the issues in the store are happening more and more despite the local agency's efforts to help the clients. So when you're talking about issues in the store, if there's some, if you're getting clients complaining of a particular store that, and whatever that is, finding out what the problem is that they don't have the minimum stock, which is something they need to have. Certain amount of each of the food items in there. Is it store personnel having problems with that, not being able to find the foods? Whatever the issue is, that you need to contact our vendor unit at the state office. And if you call our helpline at 1-800-942-1636, and the vendor unit is one of the options that you can get there, and let them know that, and they will follow up with the store and finding out if there's things that they can help them with, or providing them with information that what they need to do. All right, and then we have a homeless facilities agreement question from Jeannie Harding. Do we need agreements only for homeless facilities and not residential rehab facilities? And we do call it a homeless facilities agreement and a policy, and it really is for any place that you have clients that are doing in a kind of a communal living type thing. So it does include things like a rehab center. So yes, you do need to have agreements for that too, if you have clients that are coming to you from that facility. And Martha Brooks let me know that Focus Hope is no longer in Macomb County. So thank you for that update, Martha. And another question from Martha is the report on the single certifier working? And the answer is no. It will come up blank on there. So there's no entries. That doesn't mean that there's, if it comes up blank, it doesn't mean that you don't have any entries in there. It's just not functioning, and part of that is that we have certain security criteria that will be implemented with a temporary certifier, single certifier, and a permanent certifier. So all that has to be incorporated in there. So if you try to bring up the report right now, it will not work. But thank you. And another question from Martha on annual clinic reviews. Are annual clinic reviews required the year of an ME? And the answer is yes, it is. This is consistent as in the past, and that really does help you to get ready for the management evaluation, and that's where your local agency consultant comes into play, and they can help you with that also. All right, and that is it for our questions. Thank you so much for taking time out of your day to watch this webcast. Thank you to all who submitted the questions, and to Amy Thompson and to Stan Bine, who came to help me out today with questions and answers. My contact information is on the screen here, and I'm happy to answer questions. If you think of other questions later on, feel free to contact me. Thank you, and have a good rest of your day.